Hello, my gentle and of course very modern apes. Have you guys ever seen a teenage chimpanzee? Me either. Welcome to Gutsick Gibbon. This is a channel where we talk about the latest discoveries in paleoanthropology, primatology, biology generally, really just things that I find interesting that are somewhere within the orbit of what I formally study. We also do a lot of debunking pseudoscience. We just did a whole lot of that recently though.
Count 1, guilty. Count 2, guilty. Count 3, guilty.
Yep. I've been feeling a bit off mentally recently, and I was going to keep that to myself and deal with that privately, but I missed the attention, so I'm going to make it everyone else's problem.
So we're taking a little breather and digging into some recent discoveries that may help shed some light on that question I asked at the beginning, specifically with regard to our own evolutionary history. Why do humans become teenagers? And why don't other apes have a teenage phase? To be honest, I'm glad they don't. I would not want to be the target of a teenage chimpanzee's angst. But since humans do have a teenage phase, it's an important question to ask because it may be part of the reason as to why we're so dominant today and why we are the way that we are. So let's get started. In biology, there's a concept called life history, and what this refers to is simply how organisms grow up, survive, and reproduce over time. As you can imagine, there is an enormous variety of different life history types across the animal kingdom. Most broadly, you may remember R-selected versus K-selected species from high school biology. This just refers to the two general strategies that organisms may take. From an evolutionary perspective, the ultimate goal of an organism is to pass its genes on to the next generation, and in order to do so, they must have offspring. The problem with offspring is that they are both expensive and fragile. It takes a ridiculous amount of energy to build offspring, although it does vary depending on whether the critter in question is laying a simple egg that does most of its development later on, or whether you're building an entire offspring within the confines of your body and then giving birth to it. But after you go to all of that effort, metabolically speaking, the offspring might still die. They are little, they are fragile, and usually they are very tasty to other things that are already roaming about the landscape. This is obviously evolutionarily frustrating because you want to pass your genes on to the next generation, and oftentimes they are not holding up their end of the bargain in passing on their genes, your genes, on to the following one. As a parent, though, you do have a way to increase the odds that your offspring will survive, and that's by investing in them. This means providing them with resources, teaching them how to live, and protecting them from predators. The problem is, you only have so much time, and you also have to worry about keeping yourself well fed, up, and running, and so you're left with something of a quandary. You can invest a lot in one or a few offspring, or you can invest very little in an absolute ton of them. This occurring at the species level is how we get K versus R-selected species. In K-selected species, we're seeing that heavy investment in just one or a few offspring, and in R-selected species, we're seeing the opposite. A parent is having a ton of offspring and doing very little after they're born. Obviously, the strategy that you take reproductively speaking is going to have some pretty serious implications on your life history. K-selected species tend to have longer lifespans, whereas R-selected species very literally live fast and die young. There are some obvious examples of the extremes of both K-selected species and R-selected species, with extreme K-selected species being things like elephants or whales or humans, and extreme R-selected species being really anything that's having these massive clutches of eggs and then abandoning them immediately afterwards. Several different species of frogs, or reptiles, or fish, and many plants like dandelions, for instance. But biology is messy and annoying and wonderful, and so there are tons of different species that occupy the middle ground. They aren't quite fully K-selected, and they aren't quite fully R-selected species. I've given this preface because humans are, as I said earlier, K-selected species but we are extreme, even within our extreme corner of this reproductive strategy. And this has enormous impact, of course, on our life history as a species. All primates obviously invest very heavily in their young, but apes dial this up to 11 and humans dial this up to like 15 or something like that. Case-selected species in general tend to have very long gestation periods, and this makes sense. You're going to build your offspring as much as possible, prepare it as much as possible inside your own body before giving birth to it, where then you are going to invest even more in it. Human gestation is approximately 280 days, and all great apes have these long gestation periods, with orangutans being around 270, gorillas being around 260, and chimpanzees being around 240. There's a pretty strong relationship between brain size and gestational period, at least within mammals, and this holds, of course, within the great apes as well as in apes generally. Gibbons have a gestation of around 215 days, which means all apes, or hominoids, blow monkeys out of the water when it comes to taking time in their mother's wombs, but this holds across mammals as well. When you think of cognitively inclined mammals, like elephants or whales, they too have extremely long gestational periods, and they're all, of course, known for being extremely intelligent mammals. This holds not just within the gestational period of mammals that are known for being cognitively inclined, but also for the stages of their life history. It takes brainy mammals not just a long time to develop in the womb, but a long time to grow up. Brainy animals have to grow those brains in the first place, both within and outside of utero, but then they also have to learn how to use them, both socially and when it comes to critical thinking and problem solving within their given environments. This is the ultimate investment that a parent might place in their offspring. Orangutan babies might stay with their mothers up to 12 years before finally striking out on their own, although usually it's around 8. This is the second longest childhood, as it were, in the animal kingdom, second only to us. And the human life history idiosyncrasies don't just stop there. We don't just drag out each individual period, taking forever to grow up, but we also add new stages. Other ape life histories are typically broken down like this: infant, juvenile, adult. But humans have added 2 additional distinct categories in between infant and juvenile, the period of childhood, and in between juvenile and adult, the adolescent stage, being a teenager. In humans, each stage is marked by birth, weaning, the first molar eruption, sexual maturity, and full physical maturity. But in other apes, the weaning stage and the eruption of the first molar happen about at the same time, as does reaching sexual and physical maturity. The disparity in humans between sexual maturity and physical maturity may have something to do with the fact that our brains take forever to finish developing, but I want to make a quick note first. Chimpanzees may reach sexual maturity at the age of 9, but they typically don't have their first baby until 15, 6 years later. I do not think that it is a coincidence that humans also reach sexual maturity fairly young, at around 13 years of age on average, and yet the age of consent in most places is many, many years after that, typically around the age of 18. And I think it should stay that way.
Do not be a pervert near me. It's really bad.
I digress. The pieces of the puzzle come together quite nicely here. The bigger brain you have as an adult, the longer your life history, especially early on, which means that if apes are elaborating on a pattern seen generally in primates, long life history and bigger brains, then humans are elaborating on that same pattern seen in apes. Even bigger brains, even longer life history. This creates a really nice and neat evolutionary prediction then, doesn't it? If human evolution is true, we should see the emergence of the human-like pace of life history emerge slowly over time in earlier hominins, and this should probably roughly coincide with the increase in brain case size, probably preceding it slightly, in order to facilitate it. Now, I have talked extensively on this channel about how we do in fact see the slow morphologic change over geologic time from the most basal-looking Miocene apes up to anatomically modern Homo sapiens, we see the characteristics that define us emerge slowly with breathtaking clarity as we look through the fossil record. And I've created this graphic and used it often to show you that breathtaking detail, how we see the emergence of the human brain case size emerge slowly through geologic time, citing each individual species, the time in which it lived, and of course the specimen in question. But for our research inquiry today, we require something that we don't have for every single hominin species: other life history stages. We need more than just an adult representative in order to assess how life history has changed over time. We need kids. That sounds so morbid, doesn't it? Bring me the dead hominin children post haste so that we might investigate their life history. Fortunately, we have so many fossils that we don't know what to do with them all. Hominin evolution is so ridiculously well characterized that we actually do have several hominin children with which to draw information from. First, let's be good scientists and start with the prediction that was made before many of these discoveries, including the one for today, actually came to pass. And that prediction is this: if brain case size increase is facilitated by a longer life history, then we should see the lengthening of life histories in the fossil record show up first, shouldn't we? Now, I know what you're thinking. We just went over the milestones for human life history, and not all of them are, like, osteodontic in nature. So how exactly are we supposed to investigate this? And allow me to clarify something for you. They actually are osteodontic in nature. The stages of human life history show up in the teeth. Humans, like all primates, are not born with all of our teeth. Our deciduous set erupts first, and then we replace that deciduous set with our permanent teeth as we age. But even when our permanent teeth show up, they do not show up at the same time. Our molars show up one at a time, and they do so at predictable age ranges. In each quadrant of the mouth, a human has 3 molars, just like every single other catarrhine primate, and these molars erupt, as I said, predictably. The first molar erupts at roughly 6 years of age, denoting the onset of the juvenile stage of human life history. The second molar erupts in between 12 and 13, roughly denoting the onset of the adolescent stage of human development and roughly coinciding with sexual maturity. And the third molars, the wisdom teeth, erupt between 18 and 25, roughly denoting adulthood in the human life history pattern. Age can also be estimated in humans if you have only, say, a skeleton by looking at the closure of growth plates, also called epiphyseal plates, in certain regions of the body. This means that partial skeletons and teeth can tell us a lot about the evolution of life history across hominin evolution. And fortunately, as I said earlier, we've got a lot of teeth and we've got a lot of skeletons from hominins of a lot of different ages. So let's take a closer look at that. But first, let's make our prediction a little bit more precise. If we expect big changes in life history to coincide with big changes in brain case size, and more specifically to slightly precede it, around which hominin should we expect life history to begin to look more and more human? Well, the biggest changes in life history should probably be around the time when we see the biggest change in brain case size, which is going to be early genus Homo, around the tail end of Homo habilis, and at the beginning of Homo erectus sensu lato. Human brain case size does not show up overnight, and so we shouldn't expect the human-like life history pattern to either. We should see it emerge slowly over geologic time across the hominin fossil record, and specifically, we should see hominins with smaller brain case sizes have a more non-human great ape-like pattern, and hominins that have larger brain case sizes have a more modern human life history pattern, and this is precisely what we do see. Hominin fossils belonging to Australopith youngsters, like the Tong child or the Dakika child, have been investigated and reveal a life history pattern that, while more human-like than something like a chimpanzee, is still much closer to something like a chimpanzee than it is to an anatomically modern human. This is not surprising. Their brain case size is not that much larger than what we see in modern chimps. On the other end of the spectrum, we have fossils from Homo neanderthalensis, Neanderthals, who were ridiculously similar to humans and only went extinct roughly 40,000 years ago. Fossils from kid Neanderthals reveal that while Neanderthals did grow up faster than modern humans, displaying a more primitive or basal state, they're still way more similar to modern humans than they are to modern chimpanzees. So Australopiths are more similar to chimps, but not fully chimp-like, and Neanderthals are more similar to humans, but not fully human-like. Can we find something in between those two hominins? Of course, we must look to Homo erectus. Homo erectus is a very confusing species for a lot of different reasons, and I'll summarize it like this. This hominin has a lot of different specimens belonging to it, and if we go with that broad tent for this species, sensu lato, as it's called, then this hominin lived for roughly 2 million years and has an absolute metric tons worth of variation jam-packed within it. It's also found worldwide. Some people think that Homo erectus should be split into species that are themselves a little bit more strict in what can fall within them. Usually the species that Homo erectus is broken down into is African Homo erectus, which we call Homo ergaster, Georgian Homo erectus, which we call Homo georgicus, and Asian Homo erectus, which gets to maintain the name Homo erectus. The oldest Homo erectus specimens come from Drimmelen in South Africa at around 2 million years of age, and it's a little bit contentious of a specimen. After that, we find Homo erectus that are roughly 1.8-ish million years of age outside of Africa in Georgia. Then we find Homo erectus both in Africa and in Asia, in between roughly 1.5 and 1.7 million years of age. So the consensus as it stands goes a little something like this. Homo erectus descends from Homo habilis, or something very similar to it, in Africa, and then, after many attempts, manages to spread across the old world, as it were, so Europe and Asia. It also continues to evolve within Africa. So what that means is that the very, very oldest Homo erectus, if we could find more of it in South Africa, should be the most primitive in brain case size and in life history, followed by the earliest expansions out of Africa, and then followed after that by the ones still evolving within Africa, specifically East Africa, and the ones that we find out in Asia and in Oceania. We don't have great Homo habilis juvenile remains, or any that I'm aware of that can be informative, so the next best thing is going to be early Homo erectus, either within Africa or having just left Africa. And that is exactly what we have, in the form of a kid found in Dmanisi, Georgia. The paper today comes to us from Zolikoffer, who is a part of David Lord Kapanitz's team in Dmanisi. These guys have been at this site for a super long time. And the paper is titled Dental Evidence for Extended Growth in Early Homo from Dmanisi, and it was published in Nature just this past week. Dmanisi is located in the country of Georgia, not like the United States state of Georgia. And Georgia oftentimes is hard to picture in one's mind. I tend to think of it as the country that sort of is the confluence of the Middle East, Asia, and Europe. And you can see here a little map in the background that sort of might place it for you. Georgia, then, is a pretty important country for us with regard to human evolution, because the odds that an intrepid young hominin first leaving Africa would pass through it are pretty good. And indeed, this is why in 2001, the team that we're discussing today first found a treasure trove of early Homo erectus fossils from Dmanisi, the site in question. The Dmanisi hominins are really well represented. They are notorious for these 5 specific skulls that are found at the site, Dmanisi 1 through 5, which show an insane amount of variation and also display very primitive features that look in some ways more like Homo habilis than they do like Homo erectus. This has caused some people to propose that the Dmanisi hominins should not be ascribed to Homo erectus, but to something called Homo georgicus, which sort of spans the gap between Homo habilis and Homo erectus. One of the main features that people point to that align the Dmanisi hominins more with Homo habilis than Homo erectus is the brain case size. The Dmanisi hominins have a brain case size range in these skulls that is 545 to 775 cc's, which is basically encompassing the Homo habilis range and only dipping into the lower end of the Homo erectus range. But it also has derived aspects in its postcranial morphology, portions of its teeth, and portions of its face. This means that this hominin is ridiculously difficult to place taxonomically speaking, but that it is absolutely perfect for our question today if there is in fact a kid present. And there is. As always, we will begin with the abstract. Human life history is characterized by an extended period of immaturity during which there is a disjunction between cerebral and somatic growth rates. This mode of ontogeny is thought to be essential for the acquisition of advanced cognitive capabilities in a socially complex environment while the brain is still growing. Key information about when and how this pattern evolved can be gleaned from the teeth of fossil hominins because dental development informs about the pace of life history. This is what we talked about earlier. Here we show the first evolutionary steps towards an extended growth phase that occurred during the genus Homo at least 1.77 million years ago, before any substantial increase in brain size. One of the really cool things about this study is that they used a method that is non-destructive. So typically when you want to investigate life history, you have to destroy the tooth in question, powder it, right? So that you can run a lot of chemical analyses on it and so on and so forth. But these guys have managed to do so without destroying the teeth, which has some pretty big implications for running these kinds of analyses on other hominoids, which I think is super phenomenal. Obviously, I actually know some people who are looking for non-destructive means by which to investigate this question exactly, so I already sent this paper to them. Their methods here are listed in the abstract. We used synchrotron phase contrast tomography to track the microstructural development of the dentition of a subadult early Homo individual from Dmanisi, Georgia. So they're scanning the teeth. Right? That's the simple version of what we're talking about here. They're taking cool scans of the teeth that allow them to see the inside of the teeth and investigate how the teeth are growing and when major phases of development are occurring in each individual tooth. The individual died at the age of 11.4 plus or minus 0.6 years, so between 10 and 12, shortly before reaching dental maturity. Tooth growth rates were high, similar to the rates in living great apes. However, the Dmanisi individual showed a human-like delayed formation of the posterior relative to the anterior dentition and a late growth spurt of the dentition as a whole. So the teeth themselves were coming in quickly, more similar to great apes than modern humans in these guys, but there was a disparity between the anterior dentition and the posterior dentition. The posterior dentition being the premolars and the molars. That disparity is something that is very extreme in humans, and these guys are already exhibiting it. The teeth are also coming in late instead of coming in early. They may be growing fast once they do start coming in, but the timing is looking more human than it is like other great apes. The unique combination of great ape-like and human-like features of dental ontogeny suggests that early Homo had evolved an extended growth phase before a general slowdown in life history, possibly related to biocultural reproduction rather than brain growth. So let's get into this a little bit. Let's read their background and read about how they did it and read about what they found specifically while simultaneously putting it into the context of what we've all already talked about. They start off by saying that humans exhibit several aspects of life history that are different from other great apes, such as helpless newborns, so human babies are even more helpless than chimp babies, which are pretty helpless, early weaning, and allomaternal infant care. Allomaternal means that there are other members of the group that will take care of the baby, whether we're talking about the husband in the case of humans, aunts, uncles, cousins, things of that nature. A prolonged postnatal growth period, so the brain continues to grow, and it grows for a very long time after you are an infant and after gestation, but that this is exaggerated compared to other animals. Delayed somatic maturation, late onset of reproduction, so again, that disparity between physical and sexual maturity, and indeed those stages in and of themselves. Transgenerational operation and long post-reproductive life. So that's like even after you are no longer reproductively viable, you're still contributing to the group, you're still helping raise your offspring's offspring. This is like the importance of elders in human groups and the fact that older women undergo menopause, things of that nature. All of this contributes to the weird human life history, although so far in this video we've only focused on, as I mentioned earlier, the early parts that make our life history weird. In particular, humans have an extended period of immaturity called childhood, the time after weaning before the attainment of nutritional independence that is characterized by allopaternal care and ample opportunities for social learning. These traits do not fossilize, however, so inferences on the evolution of human life history must be drawn from developmental proxies preserved in hominin fossils. Teeth are of special relevance because their crowns and roots grow by the daily incremental deposition of enamel and dentin layers, respectively, thereby conserving detailed information about the maturation schedule of an individual's masticatory system. Humans, compared to great apes, show a marked slowdown in dental maturation, especially of the permanent molars, which correlates well with the pace of cerebral development and somatic maturation across primates. So this is all what I have already said to you. In this next section, they talk about how they've been able to get pretty good estimates for the age at death of immature hominin specimens, and they point out the Dakika child from Ethiopia, which is of the Australopithecus afarensis species. They also talk about Narikatomi boy or Turkana boy, KNMWT 15,000, but there's a punchline there, so more on this guy later. The Turkana boy or KNMWT 15,000 is a member of Homo erectus, but the member of Homo erectus that they are is quite a bit younger than the Dmanisi specimens, which we're going to be talking about here in a minute because they're the subject of this paper. They say here we present a comprehensive and non-destructive microstructural analysis of dental development in an early Homo individual from Dmanisi and draw inferences on life history evolution of early Homo. They talk about the site of Dmanisi, which is 1.85 to 1.77 million years old, talk about the 5 well-preserved crania and associated mandibles, as well as various postcranial elements, the rich faunal record there. So this is our specimen. This is skull 3, composed of cranium D2700 and mandible D2735. They talk a little bit about where each element was found and like how they're associated with one another, like which teeth were found directly in the mandible or maxilla versus which were found close by, like in association. They tell us about how they used stress and eruption patterns, I should say like stress markers and eruption patterns to estimate the age of this individual. So you get some cool cross sections here and a nice chart that shows like dental development for this individual. And then they say here, sort of right before we're about to get to like into our results and discussion, they say our data indicate that this individual, we're just going to call them skull 3, died between the ages really of 10 to 12. They say the almost complete incremental growth record of this individual's permanent teeth allowed us to reconstruct the longitudinal ontogenetic trajectory of its dentition from birth to dental maturity. So basically they're saying because this thing almost completed its full dental journey here, they were able to sort of plot that life history using the teeth, using the eruption, the wear patterns, the stress lines, etc., or stress markers, I should say, etc. We recorded the ontogeny of this individual's dentition at 6-month intervals from birth to death, compared this with corresponding data from living hominids and other fossil hominins. To characterize taxon-specific modes of dental ontogeny, we distinguished between the pattern and rate of permanent dentition formation. The pattern describes how the 8 tooth types matured relative to each other, while the rate describes how the dentition as a whole matures with increasing age. In quantitative terms, the pattern is given by dental maturation scores, the DMSs, of all tooth types of an individual's dentition, while the rate is given by the DMS of the entire dentition as a function of the individual's age. And then in figure 3, we have sort of our first look. I really like figure 3b here because I think it's a little bit more comprehensible, especially to someone who doesn't study dental maturation. In figure 3 here, we have A and B. A is showing you sort of the schedule of each tooth's eruption, with the tooth type here on the y-axis going from the central incisor to the 3rd molar, and on the x-axis the age the individual is at eruption. And this conforms with what we expect for hominids in general, right? In blue is our pannins, in red is Dmanisi, and in green is humans. And what we see for each of these is that all all three are very similar for the central lateral incisor canine. Things start to get a little different once we're talking about post-canine dentition, so we start to see humans taking longer for that eruption in the P3 and P4, and then this is really exacerbated in the molars, especially so with the third molar, where humans are most different from the Pannins here. And Dmanisi, wherever relevant, seems to span the difference between humans and Pannins, which is pretty cool. In B, we have a principal component analysis here, so we're just reducing the dimensionality of like a big data set. That's what a PCA is for. So this PCA is what's allowing us to summarize each individual point, which is representing an individual's dental trajectory at a given stage, and then compare them all, if that makes sense. So in blue, again, is our Pannins. In green is humans. Orange are our gorillas and orangutans, and then special symbols represent specific individual hominin specimens that are important and applicable here. So for Afarensis, Australopithecus afarensis, we're going to be looking at the Dakika child and the Tong child for Africanus, but we also have Paranthropus robustus and early Homo in here as well. So immediately right off the bat, there's a trend that I hope you see. We have non-human hominids down here in blue and in orange, and they've got this sort of little squiggly line, like almost like an M shape. Humans make a big C shape. Dmanisi spans the gap, especially like later on here, more to the right. And what really spans the gap are our individual hominins that are applicable, right? So Afarensis down here is plotting directly with the non-human hominids that are extant, whereas the plus signs, which represent like the Tong child and other Australopithecus africanus specimens who are younger, they are more late in time than Australopithecus afarensis, they are more derived, temporally speaking, start to move up towards the human range. Same thing with Paranthropus robustus, and early Homo is plotting right in line with Dmanisi and anatomically modern Homo sapiens, precisely as we would expect, and shown quite beautifully here. In figure 4, we have the comparative analysis of the rates of dental ontogeny. We're seeing the same thing yet again. So in green here is humans. So I guess I should tell you the age here is on the x-axis and the dental maturation percentage here is on the y. So humans are immediately making this C shape. They take a lot longer to do their full development. Dmanisi is here in between them and the Pannins, and spanning the difference between the Pannins and Dmanisi are our other important hominins of note. And the pattern repeats yet again in figure 4b, where we see humans making this sort of like hump with a long kurtosis here off to the side. And then we have Dmanisi in red and the much less familiar looking Pannins here in blue. The authors explain a little bit more in depth here. Figure 3a summarizes the timing of key dental ontogeny events in humans, chimpanzees, and Dmanisi. The intraspecific variation in crown initiation and completion, tooth emergence, and root completion is substantial. However, a PCA shows that humans have distinctly different patterns of dental ontogeny compared to other great apes, chimps, bonobos, gorillas, and orangutans. Notably, the Dmanisi pattern is within the human range of ontogenetic variation and outside the great ape range of variation. Figure 4a shows taxon-specific maturation trajectories of the entire dentition. Chimpanzee dentition matures more rapidly during the first few years of postnatal life, reaching full maturity at around 11 to 13 years of age. Data from gorilla and orangutan specimens of known age suggest trajectories in the upper and lower ranges of the chimpanzee variation, respectively. By contrast, human dentition is characterized by slow early postnatal maturation, reaching full maturity around 18 to 22 years of age, and the dentition of Dmanisi, of the individual Dmanisi specimen that they're looking at here, initially followed a slow human-like rate of trajectory until approximately 4 years of age, then catching up to reach the chimpanzee-like trajectory around 8, and finally reaching dental maturity around 12 to 13. Figure 4b shows the inferred instantaneous mutation or maturation rate along trajectories. In chimpanzee dentition, the rate is highest in the first 2 years of postnatal life and then declines towards adulthood. By contrast, in living humans, the rate is comparatively low in the early postnatal period, but increases to peak around 7 years of age. after which it declines steadily towards maturity. We refer to the peak rate as the dentition growth spurt, DGS. Notably, the Dmanisi individual also exhibits a DGS, but this occurred at approximately 5.3 years of age, which is significantly later than chimps shortly after birth and closer to the lower range of modern humans who have a DGS in the range of 6 to 8.5 years of age. So let's get to the punchlines here. In the discussion, they say Dmanisi's dental ontogeny appears as a combination of derived human-like and primitive great ape-like features on both relative and absolute time scales. Its pattern of ontogeny is within the range of human variation, with a delayed initiation of the posterior teeth compared with the anterior teeth and a wide spacing between the M1 through 3 initiation times compared to great apes. As an effect, Dmanisi's dentition as a whole matured slowly during the first 5 years of life and exhibit a late DGS. However, Dmanisi's tooth-specific maturation rates differed from those of humans in several ways. Once the crowns of the premolars M2 and M3 were initiated, their formation rates were exceptionally high, resulting in Dmanisi catching up to the chimpanzee-like maturation trajectory, and estimated eruption times of the molars, M1 around 3.8, M2 around 7.6, and M3 around 10.6 being more similar than to those observed in wild chimpanzees than to humans. Also, the predicted age of dental maturity was more similar to chimps and other great apes than to modern humans. So this is super weird and interesting, right? The teeth's development, like the overall pattern of development of each tooth in relation to one another, looks really, really human. But the absolute, actual speed of each individual tooth's maturation starts off looking more human and then by the end catches up to the chimpanzee rate, ultimately being more chimpanzee-like, but still somewhere in between the two. They say, how did Dmanisi's dental mode or mode of dental ontogeny evolve? Our data suggest a diversity of dental ontogenetic patterns and rates among both fossil hominins and extant great ape taxa. Great apes show a common pattern of ontogeny, but taxon-specific differences in rate. The data for Australopithecus afarensis, geological age being around 3.3 million years ago, that's the Dikika child, and Africanus suggest that the dental ontogenies of these species were probably within the range of the ontogenetic pattern and rate seen in extant great apes, whereas Paranthropus demonstrates a mode of dental ontogeny not found in extant taxa, and I'll add at all. Fossils representing African early Homo, notably they're lumping Turconaboy in here as well as a handful of others, conform with the Dmanisi and human-like pattern of ontogeny, supporting the notion that this pattern is an evolutionary hallmark of genus Homo. So these guys are saying that effectively when you apply the methodology here to these other hominins, including Turconaboy, you end up with this interesting pattern that seems to show this shift specifically at early genus Homo that doesn't show up in early Australopithecus and then is completely unique in Paranthropus, which makes sense because Australopithecus is the parent genus to both Homo and Paranthropus. This is especially cool because earlier when they were talking about Turconaboy, they mentioned that it's previously been assessed for for life history, I guess I should say, using the teeth. And they say that the Narikatomi individual, dated to approximately 1.6, 1.5 million years ago, is thought to have followed a great ape-like rather than human-like dental ontogenetic schedule, but these inferences are based on estimates rather than direct measurements of its dental microstructural growth. Evidently, if you apply the methodology here, you end up with this great unifier in the form of dental development for early Homo that probably reflects a big life history shift in comparison to earlier Australopiths. So now the authors ask the question that's on everybody's minds. Why did this happen? What would have caused this to happen? What would have triggered it? And they rightly point out that in this chicken and egg situation, it doesn't look like big brains then caused longer life history. They underscore this by saying here, the long childhood period in humans is characterized by delayed dental and somatic maturation relative to brain growth and maturation. This pattern is typically thought to have evolved because the large human brain requires considerably more metabolic energy to grow to adult size than in other great apes. The resulting delay in somatic maturation, in turn, would have provided new opportunities for immature individuals to acquire advanced cognitive skills in a complex social environment while the brain was still growing and maturing. However, this evolutionary scenario is not applicable to early Homo, as the advanced dental and skeletal maturity of Dmanisi and Narikotomi at their respective ages of death are more similar to those of great apes than humans. Furthermore, the brain size of early Homo at Dmanisi was only moderately larger than that of great apes, and therefore probably had a more moderate impact on the metabolic trade-off between brain and body growth. So basically what they're saying here is that we're seeing this delayed growth pattern, this delayed, longer, more human-like life history show up, or at least trends towards that, before the advent of big brains, right? Which that meets the prediction that we were talking about earlier, which is phenomenal. But that leads us to ask another question. If big brains didn't facilitate these longer life histories, and as our prediction pointed out at the beginning, it was the other way around, longer life histories facilitated the growth of larger brains over time, well, like, what caused those longer life histories, right? What caused the selection for that? And the authors have a hypothesis. We therefore propose an alternative scenario for early Homo that assumes a diversity of life history strategies among Pliopleistocene hominins as reflected by the diversity of dental ontogenies. Australopithecus probably exhibited a primitive ape-like mode of dental ontogeny. However, immature Australopithecus individuals show evidence of a prolonged phase of postnatal brain growth and maturation compared to great apes, suggesting that the pattern emerged before a marked evolutionary expansion of the brain. So whatever is going on here in Homo erectus, the authors are saying, evidently, it has origins even deeper in time. So what is it? What is going on? In early Homo, according to this scenario, the extended growth phase did not evolve as a consequence of brain expansion and the associated trade-offs in resource allocation. Rather, the selective pressures underlying the observed changes must be sought elsewhere. The paleoanthropological and archaeological context of Dmanisi provides valuable information in this regard. The presence of Mode 1 stone tools and cut marks on animal bones indicate tool-assisted meat consumption at Dmanisi. Therefore, it remains to be investigated whether the evolution of early Homo's pattern of dental ontogeny reflects a shift towards tool-assisted meat consumption, implying a reduced overall masticatory load. Furthermore, the socio-cultural context and potential effects on life history and reproduction may be considered. The 4 mature individuals found at Dmanisi span an age range of early to late adulthood, including one senile individual who had survived several years without teeth. The possible presence of post-reproductive individuals in the Dmanisi population can be viewed in the context of biocultural reproduction, which implies that intergenerational cooperation facilitated an extended period of growth sustained by alloparental provisioning and ultimately contributed to increased reproductive success. So here's the story as I understand it, and let me know if you're getting something different from this paper, but here's how I've put 2 and 2 together in my brain. Tool use in hominins like early Homo erectus here, allows individuals to process foods in ways that take the pressure off of their teeth and jaws. They can use sharp tools to cut up meat, they can use big heavy grindy tools to grind up pits and seeds and things of that nature, and in doing so, increase their fitness drastically because they broaden their dietary niche. They can eat just about anything. But a consequence of this is that it also relaxes the pressure on individuals to develop their permanent teeth earlier. That selective pressure doesn't exist, but a consequence of this is that kids stay kids longer. It takes longer for each individual to grow up because they don't have to. Now, this creates another chicken and an egg problem, right? Is it the fact that these individual children took longer to grow up that helped facilitate the massive amount of alloparenting that we see in humans and already see traces of in the elderly population members of these hominins at Dmanisi? Or was it that alloparenting already existed and this further facilitated the allowance of and then persistence of longer life histories? But honestly, it doesn't matter because once this setup exists, the allowance of these longer life histories, the existence of alloparenting, and the existence of tools within a hominin population, you're going to see an increase in brain case size, nay, an explosion in brain case size, the second the mutations are present and the selection is there. In a broad sense, the hypothesis suggests that tool use leads to an explosion in brain case size effectively by lengthening life history, by reducing the pressure on erupting your permanent teeth faster, which is crazy as an idea, but seems to be supported at least by the results of this paper. Of course, all this would mean that stone tool use to access animal products, be it by scavenging the meat off of carcasses that have already been killed or smashing bones open to get marrow, well, this hypothesis would suggest that that technology would have needed to evolve before the emergence of genus Homo in something like, oh, I don't know, Australopithecus or earlier. So do we have that? Who was the first tool user? It was Australopithecus afarensis at Lamecque 3.3 million years ago, the most ape-like of the hominins when it comes to dental developmental patterns, is the first one to use tools. You couldn't pick a better candidate to point to for the hominin that sort of kicks all of this off. It tracks. In this way, the results of this paper resoundingly support the prediction that we made earlier, but with an added and unsuspected step of necessarily relaxing the pressure on big teeth and big jaws before increasing life history and subsequently exploding brain case size. Cool. And once the increase in brain case size becomes a part of this equation, you're almost locked in, right? You can always shorten life history if the only thing holding you back is small jaws and teeth, right? Individuals that don't have that early eruption simply get culled from the population, they don't survive long enough, and over time you redevelop larger jaws and bigger teeth. But once the brain case size starts to get bigger and bigger, that life history necessarily supports the species because they have to develop that brain to adulthood in order to survive and reproduce at all. It creates a vicious feedback loop. Longer life histories beget a bigger brain, which require longer life histories, which beget a bigger brain, which require longer life histories, which beget a bigger brain, and all the while you're innovating, finding new ways to exploit new resources, broadening your dietary niche, getting a bigger brain, requiring a longer life history, innovating, and before you know it, you have smashed your gray ceiling to smithereens. You are the ultimate K-selected species, and you are unstoppable. It's a fun hypothesis. I like it. I think that there is a lot of speculation still with regard to this idea. I think a lot more work probably needs to be done. We need more fossils of more stages of life history. We need to do extensive work charting how this dental development works, how it relates to timing and increase in brain case size, and how it relates to the advancement of tool culture and alloparenting. But I think it's standing on pretty good footing for the time being. The Dmanisi hominins never fail to throw monkey wrenches into existing hypotheses, especially those with regard to Homo erectus taxonomy and the progression of tool use and brain case size and this, that, and the other thing. I'm always happy to see more things come out of that site. As always, it's a phenomenal time to be interested in paleoanthropology, and the picture grows clearer and clearer and more complicated and larger every single day. If you guys like what I do here, please consider supporting the channel in the free way by liking, commenting, and subscribing. And if you want to help me out in a more financial way, you can join my Patreon. Patrons typically get early access to videos when I'm on top of things, and they get their names at the end of most videos, except when they're 5.5 hours long, because my renderer just gives out. Premiere Pro cannot handle it, evidently. If you like to hear from me in as many ways as possible, consider following me on Blue Sky. It's just gutsickgibbon.bsky.social or whatever that is, however it's normally structured. And please keep an eye out because new shop with brand new products are coming soon that will be directly tied to this channel. No more middleman. I'm sick of it. It's time that this place become a true grassroots operation. My gentle and of course very modern apes, I want to thank you from the bottom of my gentle and of course very modern heart for being such a curious primate, and I'll see you real soon next time.